Johnny Carson stopped tonight's show to honor retiring band leader Doc Severinsen. The tribute became TV's most emotional farewell. After 25 years of working together every single night, Johnny's goodbye to Doc revealed a friendship that America had taken for granted, leaving the studio in tears and creating television's most heartfelt moment. May 22, 1992. The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson was in its final week after an unprecedented 30-year run. The entire week had been filled with tributes, surprise guests, and nostalgic moments as America prepared to say goodbye to the man who had defined late-night television for 3 decades. But on this particular Friday evening, Johnny Carson did something that caught everyone off guard. He stopped the show not to bring out another celebrity guest or to share another career highlight, but to honor the man who had been sitting just a few feet away from him for 25 years every single night, creating the soundtrack to The Tonight Show. Doc Severinsen. Doc Severinsen, with his flamboyant sequin jackets, his brilliant trumpet playing, and his trademark sense of humor had been more than just The Tonight Show's band leader. He had been a constant presence, a musical genius, and Johnny's partner in creating the show's unique atmosphere. Yet somehow, in all the farewell tributes that week, Doc's role had been almost taken for granted, a fixture so permanent that people forgot to acknowledge how essential he was. Johnny was about to change that. The show had been running normally up to that point. Johnny had done his monologue, interviewed a guest, and was preparing to go to a commercial break before the next segment. But instead of his usual transition, Johnny did something unexpected. He signaled to the cameras to keep rolling and turned to look at Doc Severinsen and the band, who were in their usual positions to the side of the stage. "Before we continue," Johnny said, his voice carrying a weight that made the studio audience immediately pay attention, "I need to stop for a moment and talk about something, or rather someone who's been right here with me for 25 years. Doc, not expecting to be addressed, looked up with his characteristic smile, assuming Johnny was setting up one of their usual comedic exchanges. But Johnny's expression was different. There was no setup for a joke, no playful banter in his eyes. This was something else entirely. Doc Severinsen, Johnny began walking across the stage toward the band area, has been the band leader of The Tonight Show since 1967. That means he's been here for 25 years. Do you know how long that is?" The audience applauded politely, still not quite understanding where Johnny was going with this. "Let me put it in perspective," Johnny continued. "Doc has been here for over 6,000 shows. That means he's played the Tonight Show theme song 6,000 times. He's created musical arrangements for thousands of sketches. He's accompanied hundreds of singers. He's done all of this while wearing the most outrageous, spectacular, and completely ridiculous sequin jackets that have ever been seen on television." The audience laughed, and Doc grinned, clearly more comfortable with this familiar territory of good-natured ribbing about his famous wardrobe. But Johnny held up his hand. "I'm not done," he said, his voice growing serious. "Because there's something I need to say that I should have said a long time ago, and I'm running out of time to say it." Johnny pulled up a stool and sat down, positioning himself so he could look directly at Document. The audience fell completely silent, sensing they were about to witness something significant. "Doc," Johnny said, "for 25 years, you and I have worked together almost every single night. And in that time, do you know how many times we've actually sat down and had a real conversation? Away from the cameras, away from the show." Doc shook his head, clearly surprised by the direction of Johnny's monologue. "Maybe a dozen times," Johnny answered his own question. "Maybe. We've shared this stage for a quarter of a century, and we barely know each other off camera. Isn't that strange?" The audience murmured, unsure if this was building to something funny or something profound. "But here's what I realized this week as we've been preparing for the end of the show," Johnny continued. "Just because we never sat down and shared our life stories doesn't mean we don't know each other. Because every single night, Doc, you knew exactly what I needed." Johnny's voice grew thick with emotion as he continued. "When I needed energy, your music gave it to me. When I needed to set up a joke, your timing was perfect. When I needed to fill time because something went wrong, you knew exactly how to cover for me. When I needed the show to feel sophisticated, your arrangements were impeccable. When I needed it to feel fun, you brought the fun." Doc's smile had faded, replaced by visible emotion as he listened to Johnny's words. "For 25 years, Johnny said, you made me look good. You made this show work, and you did it without ever asking for credit, without ever demanding attention, without ever making it about you. You were the ultimate professional, the ultimate partner, and quite honestly, one of the greatest musicians to ever work in television." The audience erupted in applause, but Johnny held up his hand again. "I'm still not done. Here's what I need to confess," Johnny continued, his voice now clearly emotional. "I've been so focused on hosting this show, on being Johnny Carson, on maintaining the Tonight Show legacy that I never properly thanked you. Not really. I made jokes about your jackets. I teased you about your trumpet playing, but I never actually stopped and said what I'm about to say now." Johnny stood up and walked directly to Doc, who was now standing as well, his trumpet in hand, tears visible in his eyes. "Doc Severinsen," Johnny said, looking directly at his band leader, "you are one of the finest musicians I've ever known. Your talent is extraordinary. Your professionalism is unmatched. And your loyalty to this show and to me has been absolute. For 25 years, you showed up every single night and gave everything you had to make this show the best it could be." Johnny's voice broke slightly, "And I never properly thanked you for that. So I'm thanking you now in front of these cameras, in front of this audience, in front of America. Thank you, Thank you for 25 years of brilliance. Thank you for making me sound better than I deserved. Thank you for being the best partner anyone could ask for." Doc Severinsen, the man known for his flamboyant style and ever-present smile, was openly crying. He set down his trumpet and embraced Johnny in a hug that was clearly unplanned, unrehearsed, and completely genuine. The studio audience rose to their feet, applauding not just for Doc's musical contributions, but for the display of respect and friendship they were witnessing. Many in the audience were crying themselves, moved by seeing two men who had worked together for a quarter-century, finally expressing what they meant to each other. When they finally pulled apart, Doc wiped his eyes and picked up his trumpet. "Johnny," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I need to say something too." Johnny nodded, giving Doc the floor. "You talk about me showing up every night and doing my job," Doc said. "But you know what you did. You created a place where musicians could work. You created a show that respected music, that gave us room to play, that treated us like artists and not just background noise." Doc looked around at his band members, many of whom had been with the show for years. "All of us here, we're musicians. We could have played anywhere, but we played here because you made this the best gig in television. You treated us with respect. You paid us fairly. You let us play the music we loved." He turned back to Johnny. "So thank you, Johnny. Thank you for 25 years of letting me do what I love for the best audience in the world on the best show in television history." What happened next was spontaneous and beautiful. Doc raised his trumpet and began playing Here's That Rainy Day, a jazz standard that had become one of Johnny's favorites over the years. It was a slow, melancholy piece, perfect for a goodbye. As Doc played, Johnny stood on stage listening with his eyes closed, letting the music wash over him. The audience sat in respectful silence, understanding they were witnessing a moment of pure artistry and emotion. When Doc finished, there was a long pause before the applause began. The kind of pause that comes when people need a moment to collect themselves after experiencing something profound. Johnny walked back to Doc and shook his hand, then held it for a long moment. "That was beautiful, Document. Just like everything else you've done here." Then something even more remarkable happened. The entire Tonight Show band stood up in unison and saluted Johnny. It wasn't planned, wasn't rehearsed, but it was perfect. These musicians, who had accompanied thousands of performances and played through countless shows, were honoring the man who had made it all possible. Johnny, clearly overwhelmed, saluted back. "The honor has been mine, gentlemen," he said. "Every single night." After Doc's tribute, The Tonight Show continued with its scheduled programming, but the energy had shifted. Everything that followed felt more poignant, more meaningful because of what had just transpired. Throughout the rest of the show, Johnny kept glancing over at Doc and the band, and viewers at home could see the appreciation in his eyes. It was as if after 25 years of working together, Johnny was finally allowing himself to fully acknowledge how much Doc's partnership had meant. The response to Johnny's tribute to Doc Severinsen was immediate and profound. Television critics praised it as one of the most authentic moments in Tonight Show history. Musicians across the country called it a masterclass in acknowledging the people who make shows work, but rarely get recognition. Jazz publications ran features on Doc's career, highlighting not just his Tonight Show work, but his incredible contributions to music. The American Federation of Musicians cited the tribute as an example of how television could properly honor musical artists. But perhaps most importantly, the tribute sparked conversations in workplaces across America about recognizing and thanking the people we work with, especially those whose contributions we might take for granted. When The Tonight Show aired its final episode on May 22, 1992, Doc Severinsen and the band played with extra emotion and energy. And when Johnny signed off for the final time, his last words before leaving the stage were simple: "Doc, take us home." Doc played one final Tonight Show theme. And as the credits rolled, cameras captured Johnny and Doc shaking hands one last time. Both men clearly emotional about the end of their extraordinary partnership. After The Tonight Show ended, Doc Severinsen continued to have a remarkable career in music, touring and performing well into his 90s. But he never forgot that tribute Johnny had given him. In interviews years later, Doc would always mention that moment. "Johnny said things that night that I'd waited 25 years to hear." Doc reflected, "Not because I needed the recognition but because it meant so much coming from him. He was a tough critic, Johnny. He had high standards. So when he said those things about my work, about my professionalism, about what I'd contributed to the show, that meant everything." Johnny Carson, in his rare post-retirement interviews, also mentioned the tribute to Doc as one of his most meaningful moments hosting The Tonight Show. "I should have done that tribute 20 years earlier," Johnny admitted. "I should have said those things every single year. Doc deserved that recognition and I waited too long to give it to him. But I'm glad I said it before it was too late." Today, when television producers discuss how to properly acknowledge musicians and behind-scenes talent, they often reference Johnny Carson's tribute to Doc Severinsen as the gold standard. It demonstrated that taking time to honor the people who make shows possible isn't just good manners. It's essential to understanding what makes great television work. The tribute also became a touchstone for discussions about workplace relationships and the importance of expressing appreciation before it's too late. Management consultants and business coaches use footage from that night to illustrate the power of public recognition and heartfelt appreciation. Johnny Carson and Doc Severinsen worked together for 25 years, creating over 6,000 shows and entertaining hundreds of millions of people. But their greatest moment together might have been that Friday night in May 1992 when Johnny stopped being Johnny Carson the host and became simply a colleague thanking another colleague for a quarter-century of extraordinary work. It proved that partnerships don't always require deep personal friendships or constant communication. Sometimes the strongest partnerships are built on mutual respect, professional excellence, and the unspoken understanding that comes from working together night after night, year after year, creating something special. And it reminded all of us that the people we work with, especially those who might seem like permanent fixtures in our lives, deserve to be thanked, recognized, and honored. Preferably before we run out of time to tell them how much they matter. If this incredible story of partnership and recognition moved you, subscribe for more true stories about the moments when entertainment legends honored the people who made their success possible. Share this video with a colleague who deserves recognition and let them know their work matters. And remember, don't wait 25 years to thank someone who's been by your side every